Welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast, where hunters new and old come to learn and find inspiration from stories of hunts gone by. Everyone is welcome to enjoy the outdoor way of life, and there is no better time to start than right now. So let's head into the great outdoors with your host, Dylan Ray.
All right, guys, and welcome to Bear Archery's Hunting 101 podcast. Joining me is a good friend of mine, a cousin of mine. We film a TV show together. He's been a hunting friend of mine for a while, and so it's an honor to have him on. You might recognize the voice. He is the voice of the intro, so he brings me in each and every week. Mr. Grant Ledbetter. Grant, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, man.
It is it's a fun time. Right now, it is we're about to embark on September. So we've got elk hunt planned, we've got bear hunt planned, we've got several deer hunts planned, and this fall is coming up quickly, and so it's an exciting time getting bows ready and tuning in broadheads and just getting our hunts planned up. So before we dive in, I do want to give a quick thank you to some of our great friends at 10 Gauge Outfitters, a premier pheasant hunting outfit here in the great state of Kansas. They have one of the prettiest lodges you will ever go to, and they will absolutely put you on some birds. So if you've ever considered pheasant hunting, or you just want to get away and have an awesome stay at a beautiful lodge, check out 10 Gauge Outfitters. Those guys are absolutely incredible. So, Grant, we are in the middle of our elk hunting series, and I wanted to talk with you. You have a pretty special first elk story. So I just wanted to bring you on. You've been a deer hunter your whole life. Mm-hmm. But how old were you? How many years ago was it when you first started elk hunting?
I believe my first elk hunt was in September of 2017, and just really didn't know what to expect. Going out west, definitely wasn't in good enough shape.
A Midwestern boy hits the mountains.
Oh, man. They say that you kind of have to experience it once to know exactly what you need to be prepared for, and I promise you I was not prepared. So as you'll find out, I was thankful that I got a shot on the first day.
Now, you and both your brothers were at this camp together, right?
Yeah.
So first off, I mean, that's anytime you're hunting with family, it's a special thing. So already an exciting time just going hunting with your family.
Oh, absolutely.
Colorado, correct?
First one's Wyoming.
7J Outfitters?
Yes.
7J Outfitters, a legendary elk hunting outfit. Mm-hmm. Grew up watching those guys on TV as we were kids. Mm-hmm. We watched, Mossy Oak, or not Mossy Oak. We watched Real Trees, Big Buck.
Monster Bucks
Bucks
Bulls.
There. Yeah. And man, I remember, hearing stories about this hunt. So tell me how it all unfolded.
Well, it was just, like I said earlier, I didn't have any clue of what to expect. You get online, get on YouTube, try and watch all of these hunts beforehand and prepare yourself, and just to kind of, get a game plan in your mind of how it's going to be. And then when you get there, you realize you got to throw it all out the window because no hunt is like any other. Everything's different, and so we get there, we roll into camp and meet our guides. And the first day we go out, and the place that we were hunting, I can't remember what they called this piece of property, but they had names for each different place that they would go. But we get out of the truck, and we walk across this big flat, and it drops off down into these draws. And my heart's just pumping being there. I'm just like, dude, I am elk hunting with 7J Outfitters, and I've got my bow, and I'm like, this is just a once-in-a-lifetime hunt. And thank the good Lord that it's turned out to something that I've been able to do every year since then. But that first initial experience, it just was mind-boggling. So we get out of the truck, we're walking across there, and the sun's just starting to peek over the horizon, and we get down in this little draw, and the guide stops us and says, this is kind of where they come off the fields back into bed. And we're sitting there, and the first sound I ever heard out of an elk was 2 big 6x6 bulls fighting. We look up on this ridge top, and they are just 2 of them just going at it. And I'm like, my buddy Caleb that was hunting with me, I'm looking up like, can you believe this? I mean, we're used to shooting whitetails, and we're, get in the car one day and drive 14 hours, and you're here and you've got this in front of you, and that's where I cannot say enough about, if you have the opportunity to get with a good outfitter, how that makes a difference.
I don't think anybody understands the size of an elk until the first time you see him in the woods. I remember the first time seeing an elk in the wild, and it come out of a tree line just 20, 30 yards in front of us. Mm-hmm. And I just couldn't even fathom how big they really were until I saw it in person. Yeah. Its antlers are scraping the tops of the trees as it's walking through. And you're just and we were hunting in an area that we couldn't shoot an elk, so we were just gonna watch this elk. Mm-hmm. But man, he bugles in our face, and
there's nothing like that in the world.
It's insane, man.
I'm telling you.
All right, continue on.
So we're there, and we just get down in that spot, and he said we're gonna get to right where they come back to bed. And those elk ended up taking a different route, as usually game do. They do what you least expect them to do. And so that morning we try to move on around to the other side because there was a property line we couldn't cross. We had to go and make a different game plan. So we hightail it back on the way that we came in, and we see the way that they're going. We try to drop off into another draw, and we get down there, and he starts calling. And when I say he, it's his name's Kenny, and he's like a renowned guide for 7J Outfitters, and he's calling, and we hear this bull up there, and he's bugling, and he's looking up through the woods, and he says he's got a bunch of cows with him. He said, I don't think I can get him off of there, but I see the body of an elk start coming, and I'm like, Caleb's up first, my friend, and he's up there with his bow, and he's set up, and he's like there's something coming, and it ends up being a cow. The cow circles Caleb and literally comes trying to find out where that cow call is coming from, and it walks literally. I could have reached out and touched it with my finger, just right in front of me on the ground. Here I am, a Midwestern boy again, a whitetail hunter, and I've got this thing as big as a beef cow right there next to me, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And I come back there, and it's so cool for
Were you scared?
I was a little bit scared. I may or may not have had to change my pants after that. But it was unbelievable. And what's cool about it is to see like how the guide, what it does for them when they see how much it means to a hunter, just for them to provide. And that's something they see every day. But when they see that excitement that's you can tell that they get a kick out of that themselves. But so that morning we ended up not being successful as far as harvesting anything. We had a great hunt, saw lots of elk. But then that evening, we go back that afternoon, we rest up a little bit, and then we go back out, and he's like, man, honest to goodness, not optimum conditions because the wind is just blowing like gale force. I mean, just horrible, horrible winds. He's like, what do you want to do? He said, you want to go up in glass a little bit and see if we can't put a play on something? I was like, yeah, man. I said, let's do whatever you think. And he said, I think that's our best chance. We'll get up high in glass and see if we can't spot something. So this is our first evening of the hunt. We're going up there to this tallest peak around, and we're right there. And I believe this spot you could look over and you could see Devil's Tower, which is like a national whatever, and right. And we look over, and you're up so high you can look over and you can see that. And it was just beautiful country. And
how high were you at this point, do you know?
I don't know for sure on what the elevation was, but we were high enough that I was sucking for wind, I promise you.
Yeah. Dude, I remember the first time I went on a mountain hunt, and we get out of the truck at like 8,000, mm-hmm. And our first night in, we go up, and the next morning we're at 9.
Yeah.
I mean, it was insane how I couldn't breathe.
Mm-hmm. I know. And how you start burning, your lungs start burning. I've had experience being at altitude. I played baseball one year, and I think the place I stayed when I played baseball, I actually drove down to the stadium, but where I stayed at, I was at like 9,800 feet
Wow.
elevation. And I remember this is a totally random story, but I got up to go to practice one day during spring training, and it was snowing up there, and I drove out of snow into warm weather. Yeah.
Now, I do, as a tip, as a piece of advice, if you're from the Midwest or from the South or from a low elevation and you're going to hunt at a higher elevation, go 2-3 days in advance and just go walk around, until, for a couple days until your hunt starts, to get your body acclimated to being at that higher altitude with that lack of wind.
Mm-hmm.
Just try to get yourself acclimated to that before you start hunting. Because there's nothing worse than, trying to keep up with your buddies who, I was hunting with guys who were from there, and so they were used to the elevation.
Yeah.
So there was nothing worse than trying to keep up with them, and you'll enjoy your hunt a lot more if you'll just go just a few days in advance, just to get your body acclimated to it.
Absolutely. And so that day, that first evening of the hunt, we're headed up there high to Glass, and we're almost to the top of the peak, and Kenny, our guide, he looks over, and it was Caleb was up first. He was the first shooter that morning. That evening, I was up to bat, and he looks all the way across. I bet it was, I don't know how far it was. It was probably a quarter, half mile away. He's like, "There's a bull," and I'm like, "Where are you talking about?" And I'm like, because it was pretty open where we were looking, but he just, dude, eagle eyes, and that's what he does for a living. Spends every day of his life.
Yeah, and we're used to looking
mountains.
in wheat fields. He's used to looking in mountains.
And he's like, we're standing there for a second, and he gets in his binoculars. I'm like, is it a shooter bull? He said it's definitely a legal bull. It's a pretty good bull. And he's like, do you not see him? He's right there. I'm like, where are you talking about? We literally stood there for like 5 minutes. And he's trying to point this bull out to me. I never do see it. And so I was just like, man, if you think he's legal, and, I wasn't trying to be too picky my first hunt. I was like, if it's a legal bull and he gets within bow range, I'm going to try and light him up. And so he's like, what do you want to do? He said, it's not a huge bull. He said, but it's definitely a branch antler bull, and it'd be a good first bull. I'm like, well, dude, let's go for it. And so, in gale force winds, we start across this big, big ravine, and we go down into that thing, and we pop up on the other side, which probably to get to where I ended up getting a shot opportunity at this bull, we probably walked, I'd say about 500 yards straight down and then straight back up. And I'm huffing and puffing, and we get over there. And luckily the wind was blowing, but it was blowing the direction that the bull was. So he got up and he looked across that canyon, and he blows a cow call just as loud as he could blow it. And he looks there for just a few seconds, and we're back behind him, and he says, "They're coming. There's 2 bulls." And he takes off running. He puts me and Caleb puts me in front because I was up to shoot. It puts us behind these little trees. There's like nothing there, just these little trees. Yeah. And I'm a big old boy. I'd hide behind that little tree, but he just said, stand there beside those bushes. And he runs back down that draw, back up the other side to try and call those things past us. And so we're sitting there, and he said they're coming on a dead run. So he gets over there and starts calling, and I'm sitting there, and my heart is literally pounding, and I am just a mess. I'm like, what is this even going to be like when I have this elk, this bull, just step up in front of me? Am I going to just be able to keep it together? Because I was just a mess. So I calmed myself down. I was like, just take a deep breath. It's just a monster whitetail. It's just the biggest whitetail you've ever seen. But I just tried to tell myself all of those things. And I tried to say, don't look at their rack. Don't look at the giant horns.
Don't look at them at all.
Yeah. Anyways, these elk pop up over the top of that right to where he had called them. And I've got my rangefinder. I slide it up. There's 2 of them. One's a 5x5 and one's a 6x6. The 5x5 actually had a little bit bigger frame. And I hit him with my rangefinder first, and he was like 72 steps. And then the other one was 64 yards, and he was a 6x6. And so I'm like, I'm going to shoot the closer one because they were pretty close. I didn't have time to count their points at that time. I knew they were similar in size. Knew the other one was probably a little bit bigger frame. So I draw back, I set my pin in there, and I release it and smack right behind the shoulder. But in all the hustle and bustle of all of that happening, I didn't really notice that he was kind of quartering to me.
Yeah.
And I just instantly, when I see that arrow hit, I'm like, I just smoke this dude. And I've got my hands in the air, and the guide, he sees the shot, so he comes running back over real fast so we can see what the bull's doing. And as he runs down that hill away from us, we get him in the binoculars and realize that I'd hit him right behind the shoulder, but he was quartering to me, so it had angled out by his back flank on the opposite side. And so there was some gut hanging out of that exit hole. And my guide, he was like, man, he said, your entry was okay. He said, but you just didn't account for him quartering to you. And I was like, man, I was just started instantly getting sick. I was like, well, how's an elk handle a gut shot, you know? And he's like, well, he said, believe it or not, he said, an elk, they can't hardly take a gut shot. He said, and this is something that I think people should get right here, because and this is what he said, and you can take this with a grain of salt. This is coming from somebody that's got very little experience with elk, but here's what he told me. He said, if he has a hunter come in and he's got a marginal shot, he would rather a hunter shoot one back in the guts than he would try and get one through a shoulder. Because he said, for some reason, an elk cannot handle a gut shot. So he said, I feel confident that we'll get on that bull. We'll find that bull. And I'm like, man, I hope you're confident, because I'm like sick as a dog. I mean, sleepless night. We go back there. We actually.
Now, have either of your brothers killed at this point yet?
No, this was the first day. I think my brother Gabe.
Usually Garrett ends up shooting like a booner on the first, 10 minutes or whatever.
Oh, Garrett. I mean, he ended up there again. He ended up killing just a monster bull, his first ever bull, and it was like a world-class bull, But he's a great hunter. That's just how he does. But no, that night before we go back to the cabin, we swing around the other side to see if we can just glass and see where they're going. And we saw the other bull, the 5x5 that I did not shoot, but we didn't see the 6x6. So he said, that's a good sign. He said he couldn't keep up with him. So, hopefully he's just going to be laying off in those trees tomorrow morning. So they have a rule that once you've drawn blood, you can't carry your weapon. And so the next morning we go out. Caleb's got his bow, but I do not, because I've drawn blood. And we get in there, and there's bulls bugling all over the place. And we make a play on some. They're smaller bulls. I believe a bull has to have 3 points on one side to be a legal bull there. That may not be correct, but I believe that's the way that it is. Maybe that's Colorado. Fact check me on that. But anyways, we were making a play on these other bulls. One of them was a spike. One of them was like a little 3x3 or a little fork and horn. And so he elected not to shoot either one of those. And so we're walking back about 3/4 of a mile away towards where I had shot that bull. And we're hearing all these other bulls bugle. And all of a sudden, Caleb said, there's a bull right there. And we just stop. And Caleb puts up his binoculars, because he spotted it before the guide or myself even seen it. And he said, there's a bull right there. And throws up his binoculars, and he looks and he says, that is your bull. And he's laying there with my arrow still sticking out of his side, still alive, the next morning. And the guide, and you got to understand, they're just about getting them killed the fastest, quickest, most humane way, which that's obviously we applaud that. That's the way to be. But he was like, we need to get Caleb up there to see if he can't finish that bull off. I'm like, bro, this is my first ever elk. I would like to do the finishing if I could, and that may seem so weird to some of you, but that's just, I wanted to do
100%.
that. And he said, okay. He said, well, we're going to have to go back to the truck and get your bow. I said, I will. I'll hightail it back there if you'll just give me this opportunity, because I want to finish
Absolutely.
what I started, and he said, okay. So we go back. He marks where that's at. We go back to the truck. I get my bow, and I'm back in stalking mode. And we get up there, and he's trying to remember exactly what ridgeline he was laying on, because it was, if you could have seen this spot, it was literally, he went and laid on a little shelf to where he could see everything coming to him around, but nothing behind him. Yeah. And so we were trying to figure out how to get in on the top side of that shelf. And so luckily our guide, he's like the mountain whisperer. He found exactly the same tree that he had marked when we had went back to the truck. I mean, we had to go a long ways back to the truck to get the bow. And he found that same tree that he had marked. He said, I think he's laying where this ridge line peaks out. And so we stalked up there, and he could see the top of his horns or his antlers. And so he gets up there and he ranges him. He's like, he is right there. He's like 30 yards. And we're looking straight down over the top of him. And he said, basically looking down his back, he said, slide it just over that spot on his back. And so I slide it right there and just smash him. And he never gets up out of his bed and dies right there. And we go down to that thing, and I'm like, it's like an experience. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's more to be experienced than it is to be explained when it comes to that, because I go down there and I've got like every emotion in the world, something that I grew up as a little kid watching on TV, thinking, man, that would be so cool to do someday, but I'll probably never be able to do that. I'm here now. Not only did I get the opportunity, but I've done it.
That's awesome, man.
I have killed a bull elk with a bow and arrow, and I'm like on top of the world. I'm like hugging my guide and crying, and just such an emotional thing. And it wasn't the biggest bull in the world by any means, but it was so special to me just to be able to have had that moment take place. And then my guide, he was just, dude, he said, you just take all the time you want. This is your moment.
We're going to go find another bull.
No, he told me right there. He said, and this is what's cool about it, because sometimes you think it maybe a guide, it just comes down to just being business for them. But this is where you see that they are hunters too. There's a reason why they got into that. That's because
Right.
they just love to hunt, and it's I've seen it be kind of tough for them, because they're not in control of the weapon. Yeah. All they can do is play the game and play those elk into your hands, and then it's up to you to close the deal. But he told me, he said, I've been doing this for so many years. He said, and I thought about hanging it up not too long ago, but he said he had a guy come in with a crossbow, elderly gentleman, and he said he had wanted to kill an elk so bad, and he just had misfortune after misfortune, wasn't able to get it done. And then finally, he had like a young bull come in, what was just barely legal. But this guy gets a shot. He gets him a shot like on his last day of his hunt, and he smokes this bull at like 20 yards, and the bull just runs like 40 yards and falls over dead. He said, my guide, he said he was just about ready to hang it up, maybe call it a career guiding. And he said this guy goes over there, lays his bow down, and just starts weeping. Just when he'd killed this bull, he was just like, man. And I saw that guy at how much it meant to him. And I was like, I was just able to provide that guy with a dream that he had always wanted to accomplish. I was able to do that. And he's like, I realized then, he's like, I'm going to do this as long as I'm able to provide people with that experience. And I'm telling you, what an experience he did provide for me.
Now, I've got a couple questions about the hunt. But before I ask you those, I do want to give another quick thank you to my friends over at Wise Eye Technology. They make cellular cameras, and they are the best cellular cameras. They give you all of your data in graphs and charts, so you can see when the bucks are there, what time, what days.
That's awesome.
What weather they're there. When the moon phase affects them, and when they're there during the moon phase. And it will categorize your bucks, and it will also it will give you like species recognition, so you don't have to shift through 100,000 pictures of coons. You can just it
Make
just gives you
scouting
the
easy,
pictures
bro.
of the bucks. Because especially here in Kansas, there's times I'll look through 44 pictures of a coyote and then finally get to a picture of a deer. So
I know.
Awesome cameras at a really good price. So go check out Wise Eye Technology at wiseeyetech.com. Those guys make some phenomenal gear. But back to the elk hunt. Now, so when I pictured that recovery of that elk, was it hard? Was it hard to pull that elk out of there?
So what had happened is where he died on that shelf, we were able to go down, and the guides there, they drive little Toyota Tacoma trucks, little four-wheel drive Toyota Tacomas, and they will literally go about anywhere. And so he's coming through there, and he just rams over a couple of dead trees, and he gets in there close enough to where we are able to take that bull, and we obviously have to clean him up and stuff enough to where we're able to get the majority of his body in there. And we got him in the back of that little truck, and you talk about squatting that thing. That was a heavy animal to put in the back of that little Toyota Tacoma, but we got him in there and then took him to the meat locker there, and got him all processed up and ate on that thing for a couple of years. My family did, but no, he got right in there to him.
I ate on him too.
Yeah, you did.
Very good.
Good
Man,
stuff.
If you well, before I said, I want to ask you this: growing up deer hunting your whole life, standing over an elk that weighs what 6 times more than a deer?
It weighs a lot. I mean, I think that one that I shot weighed like close to 800 pounds.
Okay, so 4 times more than a big buck here in Kansas. Explain the different reaction that goes through your mind when you're standing
It was
over.
just a totally different deal in and of itself from the very beginning, but it was like, I mean, they are just like a enormous deer, as far as they look, but it's just like when you actually get over them, you're like, man, because you just don't know what to expect. I mean,
Right.
I was a total novice, and still am. I've been going after him 3 years now, but I still feel like I've got so much to learn. But each and every year,
and that's what I love. Sorry to cut you off. That's what I love about the sport of hunting is we can grow up and be hunters our whole life.
Oh.
But the moment you step in and try a new species, it's like you get to learn everything all over.
And that's what I think is, and this is what I try to do, no matter how many deer I kill, no matter how many big bucks I have on the wall, and I've got a lot of big bucks on the wall, I always try to learn from other people.
Yeah.
Every time I get the opportunity, because we meet people all the time that know a lot more than us.
Yeah.
And we've been doing it. I've been hunting deer my entire life. Killed a lot of them. Killed a lot of them with any kind of weapon you can imagine. But
a blowgun even.
I wish if that becomes legal in our state, I guarantee I'm going after them.
You're a better blowgun shot than you are archery.
Hey,
so
I'm a pretty good blowgunner.
Now, what you said though, it speaks volumes, man, and that's why. And hey, I'll be honest, I haven't watched it in a long time. I don't really watch TV anymore. But Major League Bowhunter, that used to be their motto, is never stop learning.
Yeah.
And I loved that because being really when I was really watching their show, I'd probably say I was a high schooler. And high school is when you get all cocky and you think you got it all down and you're the best and nobody else. And then you hear those guys that you're watching on TV and they say, "Listen, I still got stuff to learn."
Yeah.
That taught me as a young hunter that no matter what, we still have stuff to learn. But that's what I love about trying different species and trying different. I just picked up a trad bow, and that's what I'm getting into now.
Oh yeah, me too.
And so this week I've just been shooting, and it's a whole new sport.
It is.
It's a whole new.
It's like you're starting all over.
You're starting over from scratch, and that's what I love about it, man.
Oh, me too.
As opposed to different sports. I mean, if you play basketball, you play basketball. If you play football, you play football.
And that's what's cool about it. Like my brother-in-law, David Gaston, he's been shooting a traditional bow for a little while now, and he was able to get out and harvest several deer with his traditional bow. And he's like, man, it's a totally different deal. And that got me wanting to do it. And like I said, about learning from other people, David's younger than I am, but David's the go-to guy on a lot of these things. And he's my younger brother-in-law, but I have no qualms with going to him and be like, dude, how do I do this?
Yeah.
And he will shoot you straight every time.
I went to him Sunday at church. So,
I'm telling you.
I need to know what kind of string to get.
Absolutely. And that's what's so cool about it is, and I think the hunting industry as a whole, sometimes we struggle with, probably
humbling ourselves.
Yeah, because pride.
Yeah.
We want everybody to think, we kill the biggest deer, and we're the ones that's got it all figured out on how to hunt big bucks or whatever it may be. I mean, kill big bulls if you're talking about elk. But when it all comes down to it, we are a part of a family.
Absolutely.
And we are a part of a way of life that we all need to embrace one another and help one another out. And when somebody else is successful, be happy for that person. And when somebody else struggles and they have a heartbreaker or they miss one at 20 yards, dude, go through that moment with them and try to be like, hey, dude, you'll get them next time, But it's just something that I think we fail to do so many times, because really, a few years ago, I realized this, that I got so into trying killing the biggest buck. I got so into that I really kind of isolated myself from guys that I'd always hunted with because I was on my own mission to try and kill
and you lose
that
the
deer.
joy of it.
Yeah, and I was setting up in a stand one day, and I'd hunted like however many days in a row, and I was sitting there by myself, and I was like, dude,
is this even fun anymore?
This was so much more fun when I was out with my buddies and out with my family.
Well, I appreciate you said that. I'll be in your tree stand with you.
I haven't been that convicted yet.
I've never seen a deer when I've hunted with you.
I know. Isn't that crazy, though?
But we have a blast.
I know.
I say that in all seriousness. We've never shot a deer together.
No, we haven't.
We haven't.
We've only went out a couple times, though.
But every time we've went, it's been a blast.
Oh, absolutely.
Because you can have a fun time in the woods.
That may be why we haven't shot one, because of all the laughing that's going on.
But that's the point, is you can have a blast in the woods, and it doesn't always have to be about the harvest. And I do want to that point, kind of a motto that I live by is just take back your joy of hunting. Mm-hmm. I didn't get into hunting. When we first started, our dads didn't teach us it's all about the biggest buck, son. Mm-hmm. That's not what the lesson was ever about. Mm-hmm. But part of your story there made me think of this. Steve Ranella said never pass an animal on the first day, which you'd be happy to shoot on the last. Yeah. So you said that bull, and I mean, I'm not an elk hunter, but I've seen that bull hanging on your wall, and I'm like, good Lord, what a monster. Mm-hmm. But in that statement, you said he's not a monster, but he'd be a good first bull. Yeah. Is there anything you would change about that hunt if you could?
Nothing at all. I will say this. I wish I would have put a better shot on him initially, just so he didn't have to suffer at all. But we're human beings.
You learned something from it.
Yeah, I did learn something from it, and I think it made it that much more. You don't know how I prayed that night when I went back to the cabin. I was like, God, please just help us find that bull. I mean, because I didn't know. I drew blood, so I was supposed to be done. No matter if I recovered the bull or not, I was done.
Right.
And I was like, God, we've come all the way out here, and you've blessed me with this opportunity. Please, God, just let us recover that bull. And I was feeling kind of just dejected when we went in there, because I don't know, for some reason I just felt like, I was trying to get a read from the guide because I had nothing to go off of. And I know I was bugging the crud out of him. I was like, dude, you think we'll find that bull? He's like, I don't know, man. I don't know. Well, hopefully. And a few minutes later, I was like, well, how do you really feel about it? You think we'll find that bull? He's like, bro, I don't know. We're just going to have to see, and I was just
30 seconds later.
I know. I felt like a little kid, because it was my first time. But anyways, we just it working out the way that it did. And then just us stumbling onto that bull 3/4 of a mile from where I shot the bull. That was just like, he said afterwards, he said, dude, I don't know how this happened. I said, I literally got on my knees and prayed last night, and I believe God directed us to this bull.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't know. He said, but there's no way on earth we should have found that bull. He said, "There's no way on earth we should have found him," and we stumbled right over the top
So
of
you
him.
should have said, "So you've been lying to me all day, giving me hope."
No, dude, I'm telling you, honest to goodness, that guy right there, and I found out more after the fact when I left there. Kenny from 7J Outfitters is a legend, literally a legend in the elk woods and the whitetail woods. I mean, he's just phenomenal. I mean, you've seen him he's been on those Monster Bucks and Monster Bulls episodes, guided David Blanton and all them guys, and he's just a phenomenal guy, fun to be around. But that whole experience in and of itself was something I will literally never, ever forget.
So, stupid question.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody this fall has a chance to go elk hunting, should they do it?
Oh, that is definitely a stupid question, because that is 100% yes.
And that's what we are at Hunting 101. That's what you're all about. Try something new.
Mm-hmm.
If you've been a deer hunter your whole life, take on the challenge of going out west and shooting an elk. Take on the challenge of going on an antelope hunt or a mule deer hunt. Try something new. Branch out and experience and find. There's a whole nother world in hunting that I've never experienced before. I mean, you get out in the mountains, and if you go a week without seeing an elk, it's going to be an awesome trip just because you're in the mountains. I mean,
and all the other stuff you just get to experience there.
I mean, for me, my first hunt, mountain hunt would have been in Idaho, and to see elk and mule deer and bears, I mean, a wolf. We saw a wolf. I mean, completely different. We're not here. We see a coyote, a deer, and a pheasant. I mean, just completely different.
Some red squirrels.
I didn't harvest. Yes, I didn't harvest a bear that trip. We were hunting bears. I didn't harvest a bear, but that will forever be one of the greatest trips of my life. Just because it's a whole different experience. But before we go, I do want to give a quick thank you to our wonderful friends over at Three Rivers Archery. They are your longbow and recurve experts. Listen, guys, they offer same-day shipping. They are #1 in customer service by far. They're the world's largest supplier of traditional and primitive archery gear, which is how they get to ship out your stuff same day. They are the best source for answering all of your traditional archery questions. So anything you've got on traditional archery, call Three Rivers. They are the best to answer those questions. Guys, make sure and check out Three Rivers Archery on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, and all other social media platforms, because these guys are second to none when it comes to longbow and recurves. Grant, thank you so much for coming on, man. Where are you elk hunting this year? Colorado?
This year, that's the plan, going back to Colorado this year.
The stupid COVID doesn't mess anything up.
Yeah, hopefully it doesn't, man.
But we will have you on again after September to talk about this elk hunt. And what I want to do is compare your knowledge from the first elk hunt to your knowledge on this will be your fourth elk hunt.
I think about 4. I think this is going to be 4.
Your fourth elk hunt.
Mm-hmm.
So just in 4 years, what you can learn, I can almost promise you didn't know how to call elk your first trip.
Yeah, and this last year it worked out to where the first part of the trip I was on my own, and it was cool. Almost got it done completely by myself. So going from the first year where I had no clue, just able to be able to pick up those things from our guide, I was able to implement those things. So that's what it's all about, man.
Absolutely.
Learning and progressing each and every year.
And that's what I want to do is just have you on. So 4 years as an elk hunter, and have you on and just kind of compare from your first year to this year what you've learned, how you've grown as an elk hunter, and giving us as novice elk hunters advice. But guys, thank you so much for listening. Have a great week, and I would encourage you to go out and try elk hunting this fall if you get the chance. There are some great states like Colorado where you can go and over-the-counter elk hunt for relatively cheap. And so go out and give it a shot. Go out and give it a try. And I just hope that you will have a fantastic week, and thank you for listening.